I'm not the kind of person who posts things online, especially not something like this, but I haven't slept more than a few hours since it happened, and I think I just need to get it out. My name is Daniel, I'm 41, and I work maintenance for a ski resort in southern Colorado. I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I know every sharp curve, every old mining tunnel, every local rumor. My daughter Ellie was 17, smart as hell, loved old horror movies and iced coffee even in winter. Her mom passed away when Ellie was 5, and since then it's just been the two of us. We were tight. We had this thing where we'd pick a new breakfast place every Sunday no matter the weather. That Sunday was November 12th, cold but bright. The kind of day that tricks you into feeling safe. They had just reopened that mountain pass the week before, the one that got washed out in the September floods. Route 43. A narrow 2-lane stretch carved into the side of a cliff, with a suspension bridge that crosses over Carver's Gorge. Anyone around here knows that road's sketchy even on a good day, but when it's open, it saves you 40 minutes getting to town. Ellie had a college interview that morning at Fort Lewis, and she was nervous as hell. She wore this red turtleneck and had her hair pulled back all serious, trying to look grown up. I remember thinking she looked too much like her mom in that moment, and I almost told her to change because it hit me too hard. But I didn't. I just smiled and said she looked great. We grabbed coffee, gassed up, and headed out. The drive up was quiet. Ellie was going over practice questions in her head, mumbling them out loud like she always did when she was anxious. I had my hand resting on the gear shift, occasionally tapping it in rhythm with the tires on the seams in the pavement. The road was dry but still gritty from the sand trucks. Typical post-flood cleanup. I remember passing a roadside barricade off to the side, just dumped in the brush like it was never there. We joked about it, like, guess we're the guinea pigs today. The GPS didn't even register that the pass was open yet, but there weren't any detours or flaggers, so I figured it had to be fine. That's what really messes with me. I had no reason to question it. We started across the bridge around 8:43 a.m. I remember the exact time because I glanced at the dash when Ellie asked if I thought her voice sounded too high in her interview answers. I was about to tease her when I felt this strange shift in the road. Not a bump or a pothole, but this unnatural tilt, like the whole truck was being gently pulled to one side. I tapped the brakes. That's when we heard it. A deep, metallic groan from underneath us. Not loud, but wrong. A second later, it was like the air around us changed. The hum of the tires turned to silence, and I felt the wheel jerk hard in my hands. Ellie said my name, quiet but sharp, like she was about to ask if I felt it too. I didn't get a chance to answer her. The bridge shifted again, but this time it wasn't subtle. The truck dropped, just a few inches, but it felt like we'd been yanked by a crane. The steering wheel locked up. The tires screeched even though I wasn't pressing the gas, and then came this deafening crack. Not like metal bending. Like something breaking. I looked up, and in the rear-view mirror I saw the guardrail on the opposite side of the bridge. Gone. Just gone. Concrete crumbled like it was made of sand, and behind us part of the road was missing, completely missing, falling into the gorge in slow motion. Ellie screamed. It wasn't panic, not at first. It was confusion. Pure, helpless confusion. The front tires of the truck were still on solid ground, but the rear had dropped into this twisted slope of fractured asphalt and exposed rebar. I didn't even think. I slammed the gear into park, unbuckled, and lunged across to grab Ellie's hand. I remember yelling her name over and over. She was trying to unbuckle, but the belt was jammed. It was locked tight across her chest like it had snapped into some kind of tension mode. Her eyes were wide, frozen, and she kept tugging at the latch with both hands, panic taking over. I climbed into her seat, tried to help, but the truck shifted again. This time it started tilting. I swear I felt the earth underneath us give a little, like the whole slab we were on was floating. I grabbed the pocket knife I always keep clipped to my jeans, one of those things you carry so long you forget it's there. I fumbled to flip it open. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped it once, and when I finally got it open and tried to slice the seatbelt, I realized the angle was wrong. The blade kept catching on the padding. Ellie was crying now, saying she didn't want to die, and I just kept saying, "You're not. You're not. I've got you." But then something snapped beneath us. Loud. Sharp. The truck jolted and suddenly we were tilting forward. She slid out of my grip. I don't know how, but I was thrown sideways, and the door on my side popped open from the impact. I grabbed the edge and held on. There was this split second, not even a full second, where I could see her through the passenger window, still strapped in, both hands on the belt, mouth open mid-scream. Then the truck dropped. Not all at once. It didn't plummet like in the movies. It peeled away. The section of bridge beneath it cracked down the middle and peeled down into the gorge like it was being unzipped. I was still clinging to the edge of solid ground. I don't remember if I screamed. I think I did. All I know is that everything turned white in my vision, and I couldn't hear anything but my own heartbeat slamming in my ears. Then there was silence. Like dead silence. I don't know how long I stayed there, sprawled on the concrete, just staring at the place where the bridge used to be. My hands were cut up from gripping the edge, and my knees were torn from the fall, but I didn't feel any of it. My brain refused to process what had just happened. The truck was gone. My daughter was gone. The only sound was the wind howling through the canyon, and it had this weird hollow tone, like the gorge itself was exhaling. I crawled back from the edge, shaking, coughing, tasting metal in my mouth. I remember trying to scream her name again, but it came out broken, like a whisper soaked in gravel. Eventually, a car came up the road behind me, a silver Subaru. The guy driving slammed the brakes when he saw the wreckage, jumped out, started yelling. I couldn't answer him. I just pointed to the edge. I couldn't form words. He must have called 911 because within 20 minutes, there were sirens echoing through the trees. Search and rescue showed up fast. Helicopters, drones, even dogs. But the sun was already getting low, and the wind down in the gorge was too strong for a proper descent that day. They told me to sit down, that they'd get to her. I didn't sit. I stood on that edge for 4 hours straight, until one of the firefighters finally pulled me back by the shoulders. They found the truck the next morning, 70 feet down, crushed between jagged rocks and part of a fallen pine. It had landed nose first. The cab was wrecked. The passenger side was barely intact. I wasn't allowed to see it. They said it was better that way. But they told me she didn't suffer. That's a lie people say to be kind, I know that. But I nodded. Said thank you. Let them say whatever they needed to say. The thing is, that bridge wasn't supposed to be open. I found out later that several engineers had flagged it in their reports, said the support columns had hairline fractures from the floods and should have been reinforced before any vehicles crossed it. But deadlines and politics always win over common sense. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from a local reporter. She was doing a story on the state's post-flood recovery negligence. She'd found internal emails, city council transcripts, all kinds of proof that officials had ignored warnings. The worst part? The barricades had only been removed 2 days earlier, and the official safety inspection was still pending. The road had been reopened prematurely to ease holiday traffic. My daughter was collateral damage in a rush to meet a PR deadline. I wanted to burn the whole damn town down. Instead, I gave the reporter everything I had, every photo, every receipt, every painful memory. The article came out a month later. Front page of the Denver Post. They used a photo of Ellie from her junior yearbook, her smiling with those oversized glasses she never liked, and her braces still halfway through. The headline said, "Ignored warnings, irreversible loss." It stirred up some noise for a while. A few officials stepped down. The DOT released a statement. They patched the bridge with some federal grant and renamed the route in honor of the families who lost loved ones in the wake of natural disaster. They didn't say her name. Just families. Like it made it easier to swallow if we were lumped into a group. I moved away 6 months after it happened, packed up the house, gave away most of our stuff, and took a job in a hardware store near Pueblo. I don't talk about it much. People think trauma always looks loud, like screaming or breaking down in public. But it's mostly quiet. It's waking up thinking you need to text someone, then remembering there's no one to text. It's seeing her favorite cereal in the grocery store and standing there like an idiot because your body forgets she's gone. That stretch of highway still exists. I saw a photo someone posted last week. They added new guardrails, painted the surface fresh. Looks like it never happened. I think what keeps me up most nights isn't the fall. It's that I saw it coming. I felt it. That tilt, that groan, that moment before everything cracked. And I still didn't stop. I still drove forward like nothing could go wrong. I've played that moment over in my head thousands of times. What if I'd turned back? What if we took the long way? But I didn't. I trusted the road, trusted the people responsible for it. I thought being cautious meant enough. It didn't. And I hate that the last thing Ellie saw in this world was my terrified face, not knowing what to do. Some nights I hear that sound in my dreams. The metal groaning, the snap, the wind rushing through the gorge. I wake up gasping like I'm still hanging from that edge. I've gotten help. Therapy, support groups. They teach you how to carry grief, not cure it. I'm not looking for sympathy. I know other people have lost children too. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When something feels wrong, really wrong, don't rationalize it. Don't push through. Don't assume someone else did their job. Stop the car, turn around, go home. If I had done that, maybe Ellie would still be alive. That thought follows me everywhere. It always will. This happened to me and my girlfriend Katie in the summer of 2022, right around late July. At the time, we were on a 2-week road trip from California to Louisiana, mostly sticking to old highways and back roads just for the sake of nostalgia and freedom. I was 27, working remote as a UX designer, and Katie had just finished grad school. We were doing that post-pandemic, let's breathe again kind of trip, camping in national parks, eating at old diners, and stopping whenever we saw weird roadside attractions. On this particular night, we were somewhere in West Texas, between nothing and more nothing. The sun had gone down 2 hours ago, and the road had turned into a straight black ribbon through the desert. We had passed a gas station maybe 30 miles back, and Katie had joked that we were probably entering murder country. I laughed at the time, but I remember feeling how dark it had gotten. There were no lights, no traffic, no towns on the map for miles. Just occasional road signs that looked like they hadn't been replaced since the 80s. The only sound inside the car was the hum of the engine, and our dash cam clicking every 30 seconds as it captured footage. It had a motion detection setting that sometimes flickered when we passed animals on the road. I didn't think much of it when it clicked again, just after we passed a mile marker with the number 78. That's when we saw her. A girl, maybe late teens, standing on the gravel shoulder. She wasn't waving or looking around, just standing still, facing the road with her arms crossed like she was cold. She had long dark hair that looked a little windblown and was wearing an oversized cream sweater, faded jeans, and no shoes. Katie let out a small gasp and instinctively grabbed my arm. I slowed the car, kind of expecting her to flag us down or say something, but she didn't move, just stared at us with these wide, uncertain eyes. We rolled down the window a bit and I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer at first. Then, in this almost mechanical motion, she stepped closer and handed Katie a small, worn index card. It had an address written in neat blue ink. "Can you take me here?" she said, her voice flat, like she was reciting it. Katie looked at me. I hesitated. But we weren't about to leave a barefoot girl alone in the desert at night. She climbed into the back seat without another word. No smile, no thank you. She just sat silently, hands folded on her lap, staring straight ahead. The car filled with the faint smell of something earthy, like old leaves or damp stone. I didn't say anything out loud, but I remember thinking she didn't seem present. like she was physically there but emotionally somewhere else. The address she gave us was in a town called Valenton. Neither of us had heard of it, but Google Maps showed it about 20 minutes away, further east along the same road. The weird thing was, the pin dropped in a residential neighborhood. No landmarks, no businesses, just a normal street. As we drove, Katie tried making small talk, asking the girl if she was from around there or if she needed help calling someone. No response. She just kept staring out the windshield. Every now and then, I checked the rearview mirror, and I swear she never blinked. Not once. Her eyes were fixed, like she was waiting for something she didn't want to see. At one point, we passed a rusty sign that said, "Welcome to Valenton, Esther 1953. There wasn't much of a welcome. A few dim streetlights, some closed shops, a boarded-up laundromat. The houses looked sun-faded and worn, the kind of place where time slows down and nothing new ever happens. As we turned onto the street from the card, the GPS said we had arrived. I slowed to a crawl, looking for house numbers, but the girl suddenly said, "Here," and pointed to a small white house with a slanted porch and a half-dead tree in the front yard. I parked in front, and before either of us could say anything, she opened the door and stepped out. She didn't slam it, just closed it gently and walked up the path. We watched her climb the steps, pause at the door, then turn and look back at us just for a second. Her face in that moment, it's hard to describe. Not sad, not scared. It was more like relief. Then she turned the knob and walked inside. The porch light flickered once and went out. Katie turned to me and whispered, "Did she have a key?" I didn't know what to say. I waited a minute, then stepped out to go check, but the porch was empty. No sign of her. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. The house looked abandoned up close. The windows were dusty, the mailbox stuffed with old letters, and when I peeked through the front window, the inside was dark and empty. No furniture, no light, no movement. Just a shell of a house. I walked back to the car, trying not to freak Katie out. "Maybe she lives next door or something," I said. She didn't respond. She was just staring down at the index card the girl had given us, turning it over slowly. There was nothing on the back, but now the ink on the front looked smeared, like it had been written years ago and exposed to water. It hadn't looked like that before. We didn't sleep much that night. We ended up getting a motel room just outside of town, one of those places with cigarette burns on the blankets and a humming ice machine that sounds like a dying animal. Katie kept replaying the ride in her head, wondering if we should call someone, maybe the police. I wasn't sure what we'd even say. We gave a ride to a barefoot girl who vanished into an empty house. Still, something about the whole thing felt unfinished. Around midnight, I remembered the dash cam. It had been running the entire time, even when she got in the car. That gave me a weird rush of hope. Maybe, at the very least, we'd have proof we weren't losing our minds. The next morning, we stopped at a dusty old gas station at the edge of town before heading out. The kind with faded Coca-Cola signs and a single working pump. I went inside to grab coffee, and as I was paying, I made a comment to the guy behind the counter. Older man, weathered face, worn flannel shirt. I said something like, "We picked up a girl last night out on Route 67. Said she lived around here." The guy paused mid-reach for change. Long dark hair, barefoot. I nodded. He stared at me for a few seconds and then let out a slow breath. That's not the first time someone said that. He walked over to a corkboard behind the counter and pulled off an old newspaper clipping, yellowed and pinned behind 3 business cards. He handed it to me without a word. It was an article from 2017. A girl named Emily Rhodes, age 19, had been killed in a hit-and-run on that same stretch of road, just a few miles from the mile marker we'd passed. No suspects, no license plate, just tire tracks and a broken phone. Her family lived in Valenton, the same street, same house number as the one we'd stopped at. Katie joined me inside and read over my shoulder, her face turning pale. "What if our footage caught something?" she said suddenly. We rushed back to the car, plugged the dash cam into my laptop, and fast-forwarded through the night. There she was, clear as day, walking to the car, getting in, sitting silently in the back. But the really strange part? A few seconds before she appeared, headlights flashed in the opposite lane, just barely caught by the motion sensor. I slowed it down, frame by frame. A dark pickup truck, faded blue paint, cracked passenger headlight. It sped past the camera and disappeared into the dark. The timestamp showed it was exactly 11:42 p.m. Same time the article said Emily had been hit, 5 years ago, to the minute. We turned everything into local authorities. Don't know if they reopened the case, but they took it seriously. I still have a copy of the footage on a hard drive. We never saw the girl again. But sometimes I wonder if she wasn't looking for a ride. Maybe she was waiting for someone who'd finally see what really happened to her. Someone with a camera. Someone who wouldn't just pass by. I don't usually post on forums like this, but I've been carrying this around for over a year now, and I don't really know what else to do with it. My name's Rachel. I was a sophomore at a college in Vermont when everything happened. At the time, I was majoring in environmental science, really outdoorsy, always hiking on weekends, trying to decompress from the academic pressure. It wasn't unusual for me to go out alone. I always felt safe in the woods. There was this quiet confidence I had, like nothing bad could really happen if I stayed smart and cautious. I guess that's what scares me the most now. How confident I was. This happened in late October, just before the first snow. I had a long weekend and decided to do a solo hike on a lesser-known stretch of trail not far from the Bennington Triangle area. Yeah, that Bennington Triangle. I'd heard all the stories, but I thought they were just that, stories. My plan was to do a one-day out-and-back hike and be back before sundown. I packed light but smart, trail cam, backup phone battery, printed map, a small first aid kit, and food. I downloaded this hiking app a few weeks earlier that claimed to show lesser-known historic routes, and it highlighted an alternate path that looked like it cut time by nearly half. It seemed too good to pass up. The first few miles were uneventful. Chilly but beautiful. Orange and rust-colored leaves crunching underfoot, birds overhead, and that strange silence you only get in deep forest, like the trees are listening. I took a ton of photos with my trail cam, mostly of the changing canopy and old moss-covered signage. Around midday, I reached a fork, where the app suggested the shortcut would split off from the main trail. I remember checking the signpost and thinking it was odd that there was no mention of a connecting route. But the app showed a clear dotted line leading right through. I figured it was just an unmaintained trail, maybe no longer officially recognized. I stepped over some fallen branches and started down the side path. The terrain shifted fast. Within 15 minutes, the dirt became soft and almost spongy, and the trees grew denser, their trunks twisted in ways that didn't quite look natural. The weird thing was, the trail still looked like a trail, flattened with signs of use, even though there were no blazes or markers. My trail cam was still going, snapping photos every 30 seconds. I wasn't scared yet, just uneasy. Like something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I kept going, thinking maybe it would reconnect with the main loop further ahead. That was my biggest mistake. After about another 20 minutes, I noticed the silence had deepened. No birds, no wind. Not even the sound of branches shifting overhead. Just this heavy, pressing quiet like being underwater. I stopped to check my phone's GPS and signal. No bars, even though I'd had some reception earlier on the main trail. The hiking app still showed me on the dotted path, but the blue GPS dot had stopped updating. I refreshed it 3 times before the app froze completely. I stood there, holding my breath without realizing it, heart ticking faster. Something in me said, turn around now. But I didn't. I wanted to believe I was just spooked and overreacting. I told myself it was just bad reception and an outdated map. I kept going. The trail narrowed until it was barely more than a game path, winding through dense underbrush. At some point I realized I hadn't seen any footprints. No boot prints, no broken twigs. Nothing to suggest anyone had used this path recently. But what got me was this smell. Not strong, but off. Like something damp and stale, mixed with metal. I tried to tell myself it was just the natural musk of the forest, but it felt wrong. I started snapping manual photos with the trail cam at this point, just to document where I was in case I needed to backtrack. The path led into a hollow between two small ridges, where the trees suddenly opened up into a weird clearing, flat, circular, and silent. It was dead quiet in that clearing. No leaves on the ground, no wind. Just moss-covered stones arranged in a pattern I didn't recognize. They weren't stacked, not like a cairn, just scattered, but deliberately so, like they marked something. I took a few steps into the clearing and felt it instantly. The air was colder, noticeably colder. My breath came out in thick plumes even though it hadn't been that cold outside. I raised the trail cam and took another shot. The shutter clicked, then didn't advance. I checked it. Battery fine, memory card fine. But the screen was frozen on the image I just took. I turned around and started walking back, fast. Only, the trail was gone. I swear to God, it just wasn't there anymore. The same space I'd walked through minutes earlier was now just trees. No path, no broken brush, nothing. I stood completely still, thinking maybe I'd gotten turned around in the clearing. I retraced my steps carefully, counting paces, checking my trail cam timestamps. I even marked a tree with a small cut from my pocket knife just in case. I tried circling the area in widening loops, thinking the trail might reconnect. But it didn't. Every direction looked exactly the same, like the forest had swallowed the way out. I didn't panic right away. I tried to stay logical, retraced my steps again, tried to triangulate based on the sun's position, even used the moss on the trees to guess direction. But everything looked off. I kept thinking, this doesn't feel like real forest anymore. I don't even know how to explain it. The trees looked right, but they didn't feel right. It was like walking through a replica of the woods, like someone had tried to recreate it from memory and gotten the details almost right. I walked for what felt like an hour before sitting down on a log to catch my breath. That's when I noticed it. The same cut mark I'd made earlier. I was back where I started. I'd gone in a full circle without realizing it. That's when fear kicked in for real. I'd always prided myself on being grounded, but I was trembling. I tried my phone again. Still dead signal. No GPS. No app functionality. Just a black screen every time I tried to open the map. I tried sending a text to my roommate anyway. I think I'm lost. In trouble. The message hung on sending and never moved. I screamed. I've never screamed like that before in my life. My voice sounded tiny in that huge, quiet forest. I didn't even hear an echo. Just my own breathing and something else. A crack of branches from deep behind me. Something was moving. I knew it wasn't an animal. It was too quiet, too deliberate. I didn't wait. I bolted. I didn't care which direction, I just ran. I don't know how long. I tripped twice, skinned my knee, tore my jacket. I just kept running until finally the trees started to thin and the ground firmed up again. I burst out onto a paved service road I hadn't even known was nearby, and nearly collapsed. A park ranger in a white pickup pulled up less than 10 minutes later. I was crying and barely coherent. They took me to the station and contacted my school. When they traced my route and looked at the app I'd used, they couldn't find the shortcut I was talking about. It wasn't listed in their system, not even in the app's historical route logs. It was like that dotted trail had never existed. Weeks later, they recovered my trail cam. The SD card had survived. Most of the photos were normal. Trees, trail markers, me smiling stupidly at the start of the hike. But the last few, those were different. The final shot was the clearing, the stones barely visible in the twilight. Just behind them, on the edge of the trees, was what looked like a shape. Blurred, faint, human-sized. No face. Just there. The weirdest thing? The file timestamp on that photo showed it was taken 6 minutes after I'd already started running back, after I'd supposedly left the area. I'm not exactly sure where to begin, but I guess the best place is with who I was back then. This happened in the summer of 2022. I had just turned 26, was working remotely doing freelance graphic design, and needed a break from screens and city noise. So when my best friend Tyler suggested a last-minute road trip across the Midwest with him and two of our old college buddies, Sean and Rachel, I jumped on it. We weren't following any real plan, just driving, stopping where we felt like it, camping, crashing in the car, that kind of thing. We'd been on the road for 4 days, laughing too loud, eating gas station snacks, and taking dumb pictures in front of cornfields and grain silos. None of us expected Oklahoma to be the part of the trip that would scar us for life. That night we pulled off the highway near a tiny rest stop outside a place called Bristow. There wasn't much around, just a few old vending machines, a couple of truckers, and what looked like a decommissioned factory behind a chain-link fence. The sun was going down and we were all too tired to keep driving. Rachel joked that the place looked like the start of a horror movie, but none of us really thought twice. Tyler had driven most of the day, so we let him crash in the back seat while Sean and I set up a small tent just a few feet away. Rachel decided to sleep up front in the passenger seat. We had no signal, no music, just the hum of bugs and the occasional groan of a semi passing on the highway. It felt still, unnaturally still. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up in the tent drenched in sweat. The air felt thick, like I was breathing through a sponge. My chest hurt. I thought maybe I was coming down with something or that the humidity was just getting to me. But then Sean started coughing, a deep guttural cough like something was stuck in his lungs. He gasped, rolled over, and asked if I smelled it. It wasn't really a smell, not at first. It was more like a sting. Like when you open a bottle of ammonia and it slaps you in the sinuses, except this wasn't going away. It was just getting sharper, like invisible needles scratching at the back of my throat. I stumbled out of the tent, completely disoriented, and that's when I noticed Rachel standing outside the car, holding the door open, looking panicked. Her eyes were watering, and she was covering her mouth with her sleeve. She shouted something, but I couldn't make it out. My ears were ringing and everything around me felt warped, like I was underwater. I remember Tyler trying to sit up inside the car, clearly groggy, but then slumping back down like he couldn't stay conscious. I tried yelling his name, but my voice came out weak and shaky. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. We needed to leave, but none of us could think straight. It was like our brains were glitching, and all our bodies wanted to do was shut down. Sean collapsed while trying to unzip the tent all the way. 1 second he was right behind me, the next he just crumpled, face first into the dirt, wheezing like his lungs were on fire. I dropped down to try and help him, but I couldn't even lift my own arms properly. Every movement felt heavy, delayed. My skin was tingling, like it was reacting to something in the air. Rachel, somehow still on her feet, grabbed my hoodie from the car and wrapped it around her face like a mask, then yanked open the driver's side door to get Tyler out. But he wasn't moving anymore. Not sleeping. Not even blinking. His mouth was slightly open, and there was this faint foam around the edges of his lips. That image still wakes me up at night. We somehow managed to get Sean halfway into the back seat, even though he could barely sit upright. Rachel was coughing so hard I thought she was going to pass out, and my vision had started to tunnel. I remember her screaming, "Get in! Just get in!" And then everything kind of blurred together. She floored it out of that rest stop, tires kicking up gravel, and I just laid across the back seat next to Sean, trying not to throw up or lose consciousness. I kept thinking, what the hell is happening to us? We hadn't eaten anything weird, hadn't interacted with anyone shady, hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. We were just 4 friends parked for the night. That's it. Rachel somehow managed to find a 24-hour clinic about 20 minutes down the road. I don't know how she stayed focused. Her nose had started bleeding by then, and she could barely keep her eyes open. When we stumbled into that clinic, the nurses took one look at us and called for hazmat protocols. I remember hearing the word chemical through the chaos. Sean was already unconscious, Tyler wasn't breathing, and Rachel collapsed the moment she got inside. I was the only one still somewhat lucid, but I was fading fast. They stripped our clothes, sprayed us down, shoved IVs into our arms, and kept asking us what we'd been exposed to. But we couldn't answer. We didn't know. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed with a mask strapped to my face and a nurse writing something down at the foot of my bed. My throat felt like I had swallowed sandpaper, and my head was pounding. The first thing I asked was, "Is everyone okay?" She looked up, hesitated for a second, and then said, "We'll have someone come talk to you." That pause, that hesitation, told me everything before the doctors even showed up. Tyler didn't make it. He had gone into respiratory arrest before we ever left the rest stop. His brain had been without oxygen for too long. They tried to revive him at the clinic, but it was already too late. The days that followed felt like a bad dream on loop. Investigators showed up in hazmat suits asking us the same questions over and over. Where had we parked? How long were we there? Did we see anything leaking? Smell anything strange? The thing is, there were no warning signs. No barriers, no chemical hazard postings, nothing. Just that weird silence and the chain-link fence behind the rest stop. Turns out, less than 200 yards from where we'd parked was an abandoned fertilizer plant that hadn't been properly sealed off. Years of erosion and neglect had caused one of the underground storage tanks to rupture, releasing ammonia gas in low but steady doses into the area. That night, the wind must have shifted just enough to carry it straight to where we were sleeping. They told us that prolonged exposure to ammonia in those concentrations can cause pulmonary edema. Basically, your lungs start filling with fluid and you slowly suffocate. That's what happened to Tyler. Sean ended up with permanent scarring in his lungs, and Rachel still deals with random bouts of dizziness and shortness of breath. I got lucky, I guess. The doctors say I was closest to the edge of the exposure zone, maybe just outside the worst of it. But there's no real lucky in something like this. You don't walk away from watching your friend die for no reason and feel anything close to lucky. The part that still messes with me the most is how ordinary it all felt up until it wasn't. We didn't wander into a haunted building or mess with something we shouldn't have. We didn't take drugs or break into private property. We parked near a rest stop off a public highway, a place where families go to stretch their legs and truckers sleep between runs. And yet, because of some forgotten shell of a factory and a leak no one noticed for God knows how long, one of my closest friends is dead. I can't tell you how many nights I've replayed that moment. Tyler trying to sit up and then just not moving again. After a local news piece went viral, it snowballed into a national story. The EPA and Department of Transportation launched a joint task force to reevaluate industrial zones near major travel routes. Apparently, there are dozens of similar abandoned sites across the country. Some states have started implementing mandatory checks and fencing policies, but let's be real. None of that brings Tyler back. I think that's why I'm sharing this now. Not because I think it'll change anything, but because maybe someone out there needs to know that the scariest part of the road isn't always the people. Sometimes it's the stuff no one sees, no one thinks about, just slowly leaking into the air until it's too late. I still drive sometimes, mostly out of habit. But I avoid rest stops now. I sleep in well-lit motel lots or just push through the fatigue until I make it somewhere safe. Every once in a while, someone will ask about the scar on my neck from the IV line or why I flinch at the smell of cleaning supplies. I usually just shrug it off. It's not a story I bring up casually. But lately, I've felt this need to say it out loud, to get it out of my system. If you're reading this and planning your own road trip, do me a favor. Look up where you're parking. Check the area. Don't assume that just because it's quiet and open, it's safe. I used to think danger had a face. But sometimes it's just air, silent, invisible, and absolutely lethal. I don't usually post stuff like this, but ever since it happened, it's been stuck in my head like some kind of bad dream I can't wake up from. My name's Jeremy. I'm 38, married to my high school sweetheart Anna, and we have 2 kids. Ellie's 9 and Jonah's 6. This happened last year, right after Thanksgiving. We had spent the holiday weekend with Anna's parents in Roanoke, Virginia, and we were driving back home to Charleston, West Virginia. It was supposed to be a simple 4-hour drive. We left early Sunday morning, trying to beat the rain that the forecast had been threatening for days. I remember the car was packed with leftover containers. My daughter had made a little turkey out of construction paper that was still taped to the window, and the dashboard still smelled like the pumpkin spice candle Anna had bought at a gas station the day before. It was just normal. Until it wasn't. About 2 hours into the drive, the GPS pinged and offered us a quicker route. 10 minutes shaved off the trip. I wouldn't normally take some random detour, especially with the sky turning that kind of heavy gray that feels like it's pressing down on you. But we were all tired, and the kids had started arguing in the back seat. The new route looked like a simple bypass, just cutting around a slow-moving section of Route 219. It directed us down a narrow, tree-lined road with no signs, just a faded metal gate pulled off to the side like someone had forgotten to lock it up. I paused for a second before turning in, thinking it looked sketchy, but the GPS insisted it was a public access road. Anna glanced at her phone and shrugged. No signal. I should have turned around right then. The road was mostly gravel at first, though slick and a little uneven. Trees arched overhead so tightly that we barely got any light. The farther we drove, the more it felt like the road didn't want us there. Potholes turned into dips, dips turned into trenches. I slowed the car down to a crawl, but by then the rain had started. Not a drizzle. That kind of sideways, heavy Appalachian rain that turns dust to sludge in a matter of minutes. Anna started getting nervous, asking if I was sure this road was okay. I told her we'd be back on the highway in no time. Then the GPS chirped and completely glitched out. The screen just froze mid-route. No turn ahead, no map. Just a blue arrow on a gray void. Not even 10 minutes later, we hit the first washout. It wasn't huge. I probably could have crossed it carefully. But something told me not to risk it. I tried to back up and realized the rear wheels were slipping. The mud was already thick under us, pulling the tires down like it had a grip. I shifted into reverse, feathered the gas, and we moved maybe 3 feet before the whole car tilted slightly to the right with a sickening groan. Ellie screamed. Jonah asked if we were stuck. I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know. That moment, that's when the panic really started to settle in, quiet and cold. Not full-blown yet, just sitting there, like something had shifted and we weren't going to be getting out easy. I got out to check the road and immediately regretted it. The ground felt like pudding under my boots. Slick, soft, and deep. I stepped maybe 2 feet away from the car before my foot sank halfway to the ankle. The road behind us had started to vanish, water carving little veins through the mud. And in the other direction, the washout was bigger than I'd realized. Part of it had collapsed down a slope, and I could see pieces of old wood or maybe guardrails poking out of the mud below. This wasn't a detour. This was some kind of maintenance road that hadn't been touched in years. I looked around and realized just how far we were from anything. No power lines, no road signs, no noise but the rain and the sound of our own tires sinking. Back inside the car, Anna had gone pale. She was trying to get signal on her phone, holding it up against the window, moving it around like a dowsing rod. Nothing. I tried mine. Same thing. No bars, no roaming. Just SOS only. We still had battery, thank God, but I knew that wouldn't last if we kept checking every 5 seconds. We turned off everything unnecessary and kept the car in accessory mode. The kids were quiet, too quiet, sensing the shift. Ellie whispered to her brother to stop moving so much, and Jonah curled up under his coat in the back seat like he was trying to disappear. We all sat there for what felt like hours, just listening to the rain hammering the roof like a warning. That night, the temperature dropped fast. I remember wrapping the kids up in spare blankets we had from the trunk. One still smelled like the beach from our last summer trip. We kept the windows mostly up to stay warm, but the condensation made everything feel damp. I didn't sleep. Anna dozed off for maybe 10 minutes at a time, but I just kept staring out into the trees. Every so often I'd think I saw headlights way in the distance, but it was always just a trick of the rain and my own stupid hope. There was no traffic out there. No one driving that far off course. It was like we'd been erased from the map completely. The next morning, things got worse. The back end of the car had sunk a little deeper overnight, and when I tried to dig the tires out with a plastic plate in my hands, the mud just filled back in. Anna started crying quietly when she thought the kids couldn't hear. I don't blame her. I felt useless. There was no clear path forward or back, just mud, trees, and more rain. At one point, I climbed a little hill on foot to see if I could spot anything. Maybe a farm, a road, hell, even a mailbox. But it was nothing. Just endless woods, wet leaves clinging to everything, and that awful silence you get in the middle of nowhere when even the birds seem to be hiding. By the second night, we were rationing water from the few bottles we'd packed for the drive. The food was almost gone, just some crackers and a granola bar that Jonah had hidden in his backpack. Ellie started asking when we were going home, and I didn't have an answer. The battery on the car was nearly dead. The GPS was still frozen. Phones, still dead zones. We'd tried turning the hazards on for a while in case someone passed by, but they barely pierced through the trees, and with the rain, you couldn't see more than a few yards ahead. That night, I thought I heard something walking around the car. I sat up, my heart pounding, listening. A slow crunch of wet leaves. Then silence. It could have been a deer, or just the wind. But it felt like something was there, watching us sit and rot. On the third morning, I was ready to try walking out. I told Anna I'd give it 2 hours in one direction. If I didn't find anything by then, I'd turn back. I wrote a note and left it on the dashboard just in case someone found the car. Before I left, I checked the rear of the vehicle and noticed something I hadn't seen before. One of our taillights had cracked the day before, maybe when I tried reversing. The plastic was half broken off, and water had leaked into the bulb, but it was reflecting light weirdly, like a faint red glow. I don't know why that stuck in my head, but something told me to leave the hazards on just a little longer, even if it drained what was left of the battery, and that ended up saving us. Because about 40 minutes later, while I was halfway down what used to be a gravel drainage path, I heard an engine, a low, steady rumble that didn't belong to the forest. I sprinted up to a ridge and saw a truck, a big rig, not on the same road but close enough to spot. I waved and screamed like a maniac, and somehow, by some miracle, the driver saw me. He pulled over on a logging path a few hundred yards away and climbed out. His name was Hank. I'll never forget that. And he said he only noticed the faint red flicker in the trees. Said it looked like a dying brake light through the mist. That's the only reason he stopped. That broken taillight saved our lives. Hank had to call for a tow and a ranger escort. It took almost 6 hours for them to reach our car with a 4-wheel drive recovery vehicle. They said that road hadn't been used since the early 2000s. It was listed as decommissioned and shouldn't even show up on civilian GPS systems. Somehow the last system update rerouted us onto it. No one could explain why. The GPS company later blamed a data propagation error and offered us a voucher. A freaking voucher. I never took it. I didn't want a free map update. I wanted answers. But we never really got any. We're fine now. The kids are okay. They bounce back faster than adults do. Anna still flinches when we drive in heavy rain, and I can't take detours anymore without breaking into a sweat. I know people might say we overreacted, that we were only stuck for 2 days, but you weren't there. You didn't feel the quiet like we did. You didn't feel the trees close in, like they knew we didn't belong. I still dream about that road sometimes. About the moment I turned the wheel and took that left, thinking I was saving us time. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the taillight hadn't broken. I still don't know why we took that detour. I tell myself it was just a dumb choice. Nothing supernatural, nothing sinister. Just 2 people trying to avoid a delay on their honeymoon. My name's Emily Grant. I was 28 when it happened, freshly married to a guy named Nate. We'd been together for 5 years before tying the knot, and we wanted to do something different after the wedding. A road trip through the desert. No resorts, no schedule, just us. A second-hand camper van we'd borrowed from his uncle, and a map full of pins we'd dropped months before. We had planned to pass through Arizona quickly and make it to Nevada by sunset that day. That never happened. It was late spring, but the desert felt like mid-July. We were somewhere near the edge of the Hualapai Reservation, and I remember it vividly because Nate made a joke about how the GPS lady pronounced it. The highway ahead had been crawling for miles, something about construction, and when Nate spotted a dirt road on Google Maps that curved around it, we agreed to take it. It wasn't marked, but it connected back to the main road after a long arc through what looked like open land. The satellite image showed a wide valley with some dried stream beds and a few scattered shrubs. It seemed safe enough. Looking back, I want to scream at us for being so stupid. About 40 minutes down that road, the van started acting weird. The AC was sputtering and I could smell this sweet burnt plastic smell, like antifreeze. We pulled over under a crooked Joshua tree, and when Nate popped the hood, steam exploded out like a geyser. The radiator hose had cracked and we had nothing. No coolant, no signal, and no one in sight. We waited maybe an hour, hoping the engine would cool off and the phone would catch a bar of service, but nothing changed. The sun was high and mean, and the longer we stayed, the more it felt like we were slowly being cooked alive inside a metal coffin. That's when we made the call to walk. We had screenshots of the area from Google Maps and figured we could follow the valley northeast until we hit the highway again. It looked like maybe 10 miles max. We packed one backpack with some snacks, 2 bottles of water, and a flashlight just in case. I remember thinking how over-prepared we were being. Nate even laughed and said, "Watch us get there in like 2 hours." But those were the last light-hearted words between us. As soon as we started walking, the heat felt different. Not just hot, oppressive. There was this strange, sharp silence that came with it. No birds, no wind, not even insects buzzing. Just the sound of our boots crunching on cracked earth. Like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting. At first, we joked around to keep the mood light. Nate kept pretending to narrate the trip like a nature documentary, calling me the majestic desert wife, and pointing out cacti like they were ancient landmarks. But the jokes stopped after about an hour. The heat was brutal, and the map started to feel wrong. The landmarks didn't match up. That stream bed we saw on the screenshot, nowhere to be found. A hill that looked like a gentle slope on the image turned out to be a loose gravel incline that ate up 30 minutes and all our breath. We started to argue, just little things like whether we'd already passed a certain rock formation, or if we should have gone left at a split in the path. But it felt heavier than it should have, like we were already wearing down. By the 3rd hour, the water was nearly gone, and I had this pounding headache behind my eyes. The sun didn't just burn, it felt like it was pressing down on us, flattening us into the ground. I kept wiping my face and noticing how dry my skin felt, how my lips were starting to crack. We hadn't seen a single person or animal the entire time, just endless tan dirt, brittle brush, and the occasional stretch of dried-out trees that looked like skeletons. I started asking Nate if we should turn back, and he snapped. Not loud, not angry, just tired. "Back to what, Em? A broken van in the middle of nowhere?" His voice cracked when he said it, and for the first time I realized he was scared too. Around what I think was hour 5, the ground changed. The path narrowed into this almost trench-like dip between 2 ridges, and it got cooler for a moment, which should have felt good, but it didn't. The air was thick down there, still, stale. I started hearing something. Not voices, not animals, just this faint hum like metal vibrating somewhere far off. I asked Nate if he heard it, and he said no. I didn't push it, but I started feeling really uneasy, like we weren't alone anymore. I kept looking over my shoulder, even though there was never anything there. Just that eerie stillness and the weight of something I couldn't name. Then Nate did something that still haunts me. We reached a point where the trail forked, barely visible but definitely two diverging paths. One curved up toward a ridge that I thought might give us a view. The other dipped further into the valley. Nate stared at both and just started walking, not toward the ridge, downward. I called after him and told him I thought the ridge made more sense, but he didn't respond. He just kept going, not fast, not like he was running from anything, just totally zoned out. I stood there, frozen, watching him disappear between two walls of rock until I couldn't see his backpack anymore. And then I was alone. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, yelling his name, waiting for him to come back around the bend. Nothing. Just that awful silence again, like the desert had swallowed his voice whole. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go after him down that narrow trail. Every instinct I had was screaming not to. So I went the other way, up toward the ridge. I figured I'd get higher ground, see where we were, maybe spot the highway. But when I got up there was nothing. Just more of the same lifeless valley stretching in every direction. No road, no van, no sign of Nate. That's when I realized I'd lost the map screenshots too. They must have fallen out of the side pocket during the hike. By sunset, I was delirious. My legs were shaking. My throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper, and my thoughts were skipping like a broken record. I kept replaying that moment, Nate turning and walking away without a word. Something about the way he moved. It didn't feel like him. It was mechanical, detached. I set up a weak little shelter under a rock ledge using Nate's jacket, which I found snagged on a branch. I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the shadows stretching across the sand, listening to the same low hum I'd heard earlier. Only this time it was closer. Felt like it was inside my ears, vibrating in my jaw, almost like the valley itself was breathing. The next morning, I couldn't walk straight. My tongue was so swollen I couldn't close my mouth. I honestly thought I was going to die out there. And part of me had accepted that. I kept going anyway, just one step after another. I don't remember how long I walked before I saw the rescue team. Apparently someone had found the van, and a ranger noticed the footprints leading out. They told me I'd been missing for 4 days. 4. I thought it had been maybe 2. I had to be airlifted out, and I spent 2 more days in the hospital with severe dehydration, second-degree burns on my shoulders, and early signs of kidney failure. They kept asking me about Nate, and all I could say was, he walked the other way. They found him 3 days after I was rescued, 18 miles west, the wrong direction. He was already gone by the time they got there. The heat had done its damage. The part that haunts me is, they said he had no injuries, no signs of a fall, no animal attack, nothing. He had food still in his bag, water. They said it was like he just stopped walking and sat down to die. No note, no message, just silence. I don't know what made him go that way. I don't know what I heard in that valley. But ever since, I can't stand GPS apps. I get anxious even using Google Maps. Sometimes late at night, I'll hear that same humming sound in the back of my mind, and I'll wonder if whatever was out there is still looking. I don't usually talk about what happened that night in the canyon, mostly because every time I try, I either downplay it too much, or I feel like no one's going to believe just how close we came to dying. But I guess I'm ready now. Maybe because my son asked me to write it down someday so he'd remember it, not just as the night we almost didn't make it, but as the night we somehow did. My name's Daniel Kerr. I'm a single dad, 42. And back in January of last year, I took my 9-year-old son, Eli, on a road trip to a ski resort near Alta, Utah. It was supposed to be our first real vacation since my divorce. I used to be an EMT for over a decade, so I like to think I'm calm under pressure. But nothing in my training prepared me for what happened on that mountain road. We had left Salt Lake City late because of a work meeting I couldn't skip. I knew the weather wasn't ideal. The forecast had mentioned possible flurries, but it's Utah in January. Snow's just part of the landscape. The road toward the cabin we'd rented was narrow, winding, and surrounded by dense pine forest with towering cliffs on one side. Around 11:30 p.m., the snowfall picked up into these thick, wet flakes that smeared across the windshield like paste. Eli had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, mouth slightly open, his ski gloves still on. I remember reaching over to adjust the heater and thinking, we'll be there in 20. That's when I saw something strange. The trees ahead were moving, not swaying, moving sideways. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then came this low rumble, not like thunder, more like a freight train deep underground. Before I could process what was happening, the headlights lit up a cloud of snow and debris rushing down the slope to our right. I had maybe half a second to react. I swerved to the left, probably saved our lives, but the impact was brutal. It felt like being punched in the face by the planet itself. Everything went black and white at the same time, like snow and silence swallowed us whole. Then there was pressure. Crushing, relentless pressure from every side, like the SUV was being slowly crumpled by a giant hand. When I came to, it was pitch dark. The kind of dark that feels thick, where even breathing sounds muffled. Eli was crying, not loud, just this panicked, confused whimper. I realized then we were completely buried. Snow had poured in through a cracked window and was packed against every surface. My seatbelt was locked. The roof had buckled inward just above my head, and there was this eerie silence broken only by the ticking of the hazard lights, which I hadn't even remembered switching on. I did a quick check. No broken bones, but my left wrist felt like hell. Eli was okay, just shaken and freezing. That's when I switched into survival mode. EMT instincts took over. The first thing I did was pull the emergency blanket from the glove compartment and wrap it around Eli. He was shivering uncontrollably and kept asking what happened, if we were going to die. I told him no, not a chance, even though deep down I had no idea how bad it really was. I tried the door first. Nothing. It didn't even budge. Every window was blocked with dense grayish snow. I reached into the console for my old emergency kit, the same one I'd carried in every car since my EMT days. I had a headlamp, a multi-tool, 2 flares, hand warmers, a thermal patch, and, thank God, a portable emergency radio with a battery pack. But no signal, just static. I knew we had to conserve the heat inside, so I shut off the engine and told Eli to stay as still as possible. Every breath felt like it mattered. I started using the voice memo app on my phone to log everything. I wasn't sure why at the time. Maybe to stay sane or to leave a record in case we didn't make it. I said the date, time, location as best I could estimate, and described our condition. My phone battery was low, around 23%, but I had a backup power bank buried in the glove box. I found it, plugged in the phone, and used the remaining charge to activate the emergency SOS ping. I didn't know if it would even reach anyone. We were miles up a mountain road with no signal, and possibly buried under 10 feet of snow. But it was our best shot. I could feel the cold soaking into my clothes. My breath came out in short clouds that hung in the air for a second before vanishing. Eli was quiet now, just holding my arm. Time moved weird in there. It was like being in a snow coffin. Minutes stretched into hours. The SUV creaked sometimes, metal groaning under the weight of snow and ice. At one point, something shifted outside, like a compacting sound, and I honestly thought we were about to be crushed. I told Eli to keep his head down, just in case. My mind kept jumping to stupid details. Did I tell my sister where we were going? Did I pay the credit card bill? Was this how it was going to end, with my son and I freezing to death in the dark, stuck in a car halfway up a mountain no one would think to check until morning? But then something small gave me hope. I heard a beep, a very faint one, the kind the emergency radio makes when a distress signal is received. It wasn't clear, but I caught part of a message. Location, received, rescue. It was enough to jolt me back into focus. I left the radio on and clicked the headlamp off to save battery. I talked to Eli, kept him awake. I told him stories from when I was an EMT, the funny ones, just to keep him distracted. Every 10 minutes or so, I'd tap the roof with the multi-tool, rhythmic, patterned taps, hoping someone would hear it if they were close. I didn't know if any of it was working, but it gave me something to do besides panic. At some point, maybe around the 7th or 8th hour, I started feeling the cold in a way that scared me. Not just discomfort, I mean that deep, sinking cold that wraps around your bones and slows everything down. My fingers felt stiff even inside my gloves. My thoughts started to come slower. I caught myself zoning out while Eli was talking to me, and that jolted me. I had to stay alert. I reached into the kit and used the chemical hand warmers, pressing them against Eli's chest and under his arms. I tore open the second emergency blanket and tucked it into the narrow space between the seats to trap as much warmth as possible. It felt like we were fighting something invisible. Not just the snow, but the creeping numbness, the hopelessness trying to settle in. I kept recording voice memos, every hour, just in case. My voice started sounding sluggish, even to me. Eli fell asleep again, and I didn't wake him. He needed the rest. I just kept watching the radio light and tapping every so often, trying to track time. And then, I swear this still gives me chills, I heard a sound that didn't belong to us. It was faint at first, like the thump of something on snow. Then again. Then a muffled voice. I started shouting, pounding on the roof, yelling, "We're here! My son's with me! We're inside!" over and over. The next few minutes were chaos. Voices outside, metal scraping against snow, the sound of digging. I could feel the air shift. And then, light. A floodlight pierced through the windshield like a crack in the universe. They pulled us out together. I didn't realize how cramped I'd been until they pried open the door, and the cold hit my face like a slap. The rescuers wrapped us in thick blankets and rushed us down the mountain in one of their snowmobiles. They told me later that the SOS signal from the emergency ping was just strong enough to narrow our location within a quarter mile. The fact that I'd left the hazard lights on helped too. Apparently the faint pulse was visible once they got close with infrared. We were taken to a nearby hospital for observation. Mild hypothermia, a sprained wrist, nothing worse. It didn't feel real until I saw Eli sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, cheeks pink from warmth again. That's when I let myself cry. We made it out, but that night changed everything. I still think about how easily it could have gone the other way. 10 hours isn't long until you live every second of it buried under snow, not knowing if help is coming. I don't drive anywhere in winter without at least 2 power banks and a full emergency kit. Eli still talks about the snow cave, like it was some kind of adventure. I don't correct him. He's too young to carry the weight of what really happened. But I carry it, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. It's a reminder of how quickly things can turn, and how staying calm, even when everything inside you is screaming, might be the one thing that keeps you alive. I'm not sure why I'm writing this. I guess I just need to put it somewhere. Somewhere it won't disappear like Jake did. My name's Evan Hartley. I'm 27 now, but this happened 3 years ago, during the summer when me, my girlfriend Melissa, and our friend Jake were driving up to this indie festival near Eugene, Oregon. We were all packed into Jake's Subaru Outback, doing the whole Freedom Road Trip thing. I worked remote back then, mostly freelance graphic design. Melissa was still waitressing. And Jake, well, Jake lived for this kind of stuff. Always finding hidden gem festivals in the woods, off the beaten path. He was the one who suggested we take the back roads near Mount Shasta. Said the view was haunting in a good way. That phrase hasn't left my head since. We'd been driving for hours when we hit this long stretch of road. No signs, no gas stations. Just endless pines lining both sides like silent sentinels. Around 4 p.m., a thick, low fog started curling along the asphalt. At first it looked cool, like something out of a dream. Jake was thrilled. He pulled over, grabbed his phone and said, "This is the kind of shot that gets 1,000 likes." Melissa and I got out too, more for the stretch than the photo op. The fog wasn't just thick, it was weird. It had this muted, cottony feel. Sound felt off in it, like your voice didn't travel the right way. We weren't even that far from each other, but when Jake said something from a few feet away, it sounded like it came from down a hallway. I remember turning around to get something from the car. My hoodie, I think. And when I looked back, Melissa was gone. Jake too. I didn't panic at first. I figured they wandered off to explore, like they always did. I started calling their names, casually at first, then with more urgency. My voice didn't echo. It just kind of stopped a few feet in front of me. The fog was so thick now I couldn't see past my own outstretched arm. I started walking in the direction I thought they'd gone. But the terrain didn't match what I remembered. There was no shoulder, no trail, just trees and that strange, silent mist wrapping around everything. Time stopped making sense after that. I don't know how long I walked. Could have been 30 minutes, could have been 4 hours. My phone lost signal almost immediately. I kept yelling their names, spinning around every few minutes thinking I heard footsteps or voices. But it was always just wind, or what I hoped was wind. Once I swear I heard Melissa's voice, but it wasn't right. It sounded off, distant, like she was underwater, calling my name slow and broken. Evan. I ran toward it, stumbling over roots and sliding in wet grass, but the voice never got closer. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Not from a distance, close, like right behind me every time I stopped. Eventually I started crying. Not from fear, not yet. Just from the sheer helplessness of it. Everything looked the same. Same twisted tree trunks, same soaked ferns. Same fog so dense I could feel it on my skin like breath. I kept thinking, how far could we have gone? We were parked right off the road. There was a road, but it was gone. Completely. I even doubled back in what I thought was the same direction, but it led me to this steep slope covered in moss and old, broken fence posts. I sat down just for a second to rest my legs, and that's when I saw it. A figure maybe 20 feet ahead, barely visible through the fog. It wasn't moving, just standing. I called out, "Jake?" No response. I stood up, took a few slow steps forward, and it vanished. Not walked away, just gone, like mist. That's when panic really set in. I started shouting, swearing, crashing through branches in a direction that felt less wrong than the others. The fog didn't thin. In fact, it felt like it got heavier the more I moved. Every sound I made felt swallowed, like the air didn't want noise in it. And there was this pressure, like the atmosphere itself was too thick, pushing down on my ears. I couldn't think straight. My thoughts were looping. I kept thinking of Jake's dumb grin when he said, haunting in a good way. Melissa's hair blowing in the wind, her laugh. And then just that voice again, hers. Too slow, too wet. I don't know how else to say it. At some point I must have blacked out. I don't remember falling, but I woke up curled up near a ditch. My phone was dead. My hands were scratched to hell and one of my shoes was gone. It was darker now, like the sun had gone down, but there was still a dim gray glow through the trees. The fog hadn't let up. I just started walking, nothing else to do. I followed a slight downhill path until I hit gravel. I ran when I saw it, an old Forest Service road. About an hour later, a ranger's truck found me. They said I was about 10 miles from the highway. I don't even know how I walked that far. I don't remember most of it. Melissa was already at the station when I got there. She was sitting on the floor, shaking, her hands tucked under her knees like a kid. They said she'd been found just an hour before me, a few miles away in the opposite direction. She wouldn't talk to anyone, not even me at first. Just kept mumbling, it wasn't him. It looked like him, but it wasn't him. Over and over. Jake was still missing. His car was still parked where we left it, doors unlocked, keys inside, phones gone. A week later, they found his phone by a creek bed 10 miles out. It had a dozen audio files saved the morning we got lost. I listened to one, just once. The file started with footsteps, wet, crunching leaves, breathing heavy. Then Jake's voice. "Hello? Guys? Can you hear me?" A pause, then again, but quieter. "Is someone there?" What followed didn't sound human. It was like a mix between a moan and a hiss, echoing in a way that didn't make sense for the space. And then Jake started running. You could hear branches slapping, his breath turning to gasps. The last few seconds were just him whispering "please" over and over, like he thought someone could hear him, like maybe he thought someone else was listening through the phone. The last word on the recording was, "help." Then it cut. I had to leave the room. I threw up in the parking lot. They never found him. No footprints past a certain point, no body, no clothes, nothing. It's like the forest swallowed him whole. A few volunteers said the fog came in hard that week, thicker than usual, and some locals hinted at weird stories from back in the day. One ranger told me people used to avoid those roads entirely during fog season, but when I asked why, he just shook his head and said, "Don't go digging in things that don't want to be found." I still don't know what he meant by that. Melissa eventually moved to Colorado and we don't talk anymore. Last I heard, she won't even go near wooded areas. I don't blame her. As for me, I never went back there. I still get nightmares, though not as often now. But sometimes, just before I wake up, I'll hear that voice. Not Jake's. Not even Melissa's. Just something pretending. Whispering my name, like it remembers me. Like it wants me to come back. I sleep with a white noise machine now. Can't stand silence. Can't stand fog either, even if it's just a light morning mist rolling in across the street. I freeze up. There's something about fog now that feels wrong, like it's watching, waiting for me to step in again. I told myself I'd write this down someday so that maybe someone else wouldn't make the same mistake. Don't pull over in the fog. Don't leave the road, no matter how scenic it looks. And if you do hear your friend's voice calling from somewhere out there, don't answer it. Don't follow it, because I don't think that thing ever wanted Jake. I think it wanted one of us, and next time it might choose right.
If you've made it this far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who stayed with me until the end. See you next time.